the little direction.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about my experience and how I learned all this stuff. Some of you may have already heard the story, but I'm going to tell you about how the emotional real estate cycle really works when you're actually out in the street talking to people. So I was fortunate enough that when I got into the real estate market, I got in around hope, relief. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I really didn't know any better. I just decided, like you guys, one day I'm going to be a real estate investor, and I went out and I started buying. And I bought a bunch of properties, and I was doing really well. And right about here, I learned, well, actually not there. I actually learned probably right around here. Here, I learned about the real estate cycle. So this little house that I told you guys that I paid $340,000 for, I bought it right here. And by the time I got to here, I was $100,000 into my renovations, and the property had dropped to, I think it was 240 or 260, something like that. I had a $360,000 line of credit. And on top of that, foreclosures were through the roof because it was in 1998 and 1997 when Vancouver was plagued with illegal condos. So everywhere, people were just giving the keys back to the bank and just walking away. So I would talk to people about this, and people were telling me that, you know, I should give the keys to the bank and I should walk away. Foreclosure, personal bankruptcy, the whole thing. And the other thing too was when I bought the house, I had a line of credit. And between here and here, my monthly payment went up $700 a month, my interest payment. So think about it, you guys that have variable rates. Because interest rates aren't going to stay this low forever. Right? So, you know, for me it wasn't a big deal. I was making enough money. The $700 it was no big deal. The big deal for me was the fact that I got this house that's half renovated. I got to pour more money into it. And then I started looking at the value of my other real estate, my other properties, and they're down substantially. Like I had this one condo, I paid $96,000 for it. I think at the time it was down to like $50,000. I had another condo that I paid $190 for it. It was down to $113. So that's when I went out and I started reading and doing research, and I discovered the real estate cycle. And because I was here, I got to go out and I got to test what I learned. And I found, and this is why I like this emotional cycle, because I really understood, I really was able to understand human psychology. And I guess because of that, I became very intrigued by it. So what would happen is, I had my system in place, I had my funnel, and people were calling me desperate, saying, "We want you to buy. We're calling you about the ad. You buy houses. We have a house. We want you to buy it. Come and see it." So I would ask them a bunch of questions. I'd go through the whole thing. I wasn't that sophisticated back then, so I was actually taking the calls, and I would go and I would see the people. And then I would sit, you know, when I got to the kind of the anxiety phase, which is kind of where we're at right now, I would sit at the coffee table across from the homeowner, and I would say to the homeowner something along the lines of, you know, I know you want me to give you some money, but your house isn't worth what you're asking. Will you sell me the house for what you owe for it? And I was dead serious. And they would say no. And then I would say, why not? And they would say, well, because it's worth more. I go, okay, do you want me to leave and you can wait for the next guy to come here and see if he'll give you more? And then we would go around like that for 2 hours, and finally they would, you know, chase me out the door. No, 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 how dare you insult me? And occasionally they screamed and yelled at me. And I would just sit there and smile, and then I say, okay, fair enough. You know, you've got my number. If you need to and you should decide to sell, give me a call.
3 months later, they call you.
3 months later, they call me and they're like, Dario, are you still interested? And then I would say, yeah, sure. But unfortunately, now you're going to have to write me a check. Click. You bleep, 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 bleep. Click.
2 weeks later, they're calling me back.
Right? So by then, we had moved from anxiety into denial. And, I was in no particular hurry. I really didn't care whether I bought the property or not. I was actually afraid to buy it because I didn't really know what was going to happen. Right? So I'd get a phone call from another person in this phase, in the denial phase, and I would go up to them and I'd say, will you sell me the house for what you owe? No. Why not? We'd go through the same routine, and then after a couple hours, they'd kind of say, you know what, yeah, okay, let's do it, but we need a couple of months to move out. And I said, okay, you take as long as you want. You need to be out by this date. I'm going to be looking for a tenant. You need to let me show the place, blah, 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 blah. And I would just go into the bank and I would assume their mortgage. Easy as pie. Right? And when I got into depression and panic, the conversation would be, kind of like, I've got a house for sale or a condo for sale. Can you come and take a look at it? They were still semi-realistic about their value. And in some cases, the loan amount would be at the property value, sometimes a little below the property value. But the conversation would go something like, will you sell me the house for what you owe? For sure. And I'm like, okay, great. But do you have $10,000? And they're like, for what? Well, your property is worth what your loan is, if not less. I've got to paint, I've got to get carpeting, I've got to put a tenant in here. That means I've got to make your mortgage payment for a couple of months. So I need you to pay for all that. After an hour of deliberating, going back and forth, they would say, okay. And they would write me a check for 10 grand. Now I'd spend nowhere near 10 grand. Right? Because I had my machine going and I was constantly looking for tenants and I was constantly looking for buyers. So as soon as I had a property, I already had a tenant for it, or a lease option, or a buyer for it. Right? How many here would like to buy a property with no money down that cash flows for you? Because they were cash flowing from here.
And they were cash flowing because the price you were able to buy it at was so low. And that is about to happen again in the future.
So I found that really interesting. So I bought I call it getting free real estate. I got a free property here, somewhere around here, I can't remember where, that I actually sold up here, and I made $180,000 on it. I got a property down here, and I was very intrigued by what the woman said to me at the time, and I didn't get it, but I get it today. When she gave me the keys, she said, I don't ever want to be an owner again. I'll be happy to rent for the rest of my life. She gave me the key and she gave me a check, and she walked away.